Welcome to the world of Dungeon Siege. Our last review for this franchise was already 3 years ago, and I'm eager to return to it. But before we treat ourselves to the successor, we still have to look into the standalone expansion Legend of Arana first, which is a special kind of breed. The expansion was never sold individually, but only in a complete package with the main game. This was great news for everyone who never played the main game, but veterans had to pay twice. In addition, the expansion was not made by the original creator, Gas Powered Games, who probably already worked diligently on the successor, but outsourced to the studio Mad Dog Software. Well, let's see if they made some improvements.
King! Can I have your autograph?
The story begins quite unimaginative. After the destruction of Gom, the next villain comes along in the form of the so-called Shadow Jumper. We start our adventure right in the sleepy village of Ahok. Sinister creatures invade surrounding caravans, and we are here to play peacemaker. Soon enough we find out that all of Arana is in danger, and so we have to venture off into new exotic lands. In terms of storytelling, Legend of Arana makes some things better, but also worse than its predecessor. Let's start with the positive. During the campaign, you will find all sorts of diary entries and notes that give you important and exciting background stories of the world of Arana and the mysterious Utrain people. But who are the Utrains? Well, they are one of the most powerful races in Arana and are technologically far ahead. They even invented their own transportation system for use. But the other side of the medal is they are very power hungry, and even though they are not the bad guys, you will quickly find out the one or other sick detail about these blue freaks. They love to experiment on lower creatures and breed new species. To make it short, they have a kind of god complex. This is where our antagonist, the Shadow Jumper, comes into play. The Utrains summoned him to take possession of his powers, but that almost backfired, and only with much effort was it possible to lock him up. The best thing would have been to banish him back to the underworld, but instead they started to study him. Needless to say, this only pissed him off even more until one day he escaped and is now on a genocide trip. And to make matters worse, he also aligns himself with other failed experiments of the Utrains, such as the Hazard cat people or the Zaurux lizards. As the saying goes, you reap what you sow. And what can I say? The story about the Utrains and the Shadow Jumper was much more intriguing than the fight against the crooks in the main game. But there are issues in the execution. There were not many cutscenes in the main game, which I didn't mind. After all, the gameplay comes first. However, these are now much more frequent and do not offer any value. Most of the time it's just slow tracking shots to the next point of interest, or a brief monologue from the upcoming boss who wants to destroy you. To be honest, this became rather annoying over time. Speaking of annoying, for inexplicable reasons, your party now speaks when you command them around, which drove me insane pretty quickly. Thank God you can turn this feature off in the options menu. Many of the NPCs here were also not dubbed, probably for budget reasons, and threw me out of the game whenever I had to read some text boxes. And that is pretty much all I can say about the story. Your job is to hunt down the Shadow Jumper before he destroys the world. And while the execution felt very rough around the edges, there were still the occasional dialogues that I found fun to listen to.
Fine by me, stranger. Just a word of advice before we part ways. Stay away from them Utrean folk. Their equipment and goods are tainted with evil and wickedness. They made the Hassad in Zoroask. Did they tell you that? Created them in their torture chambers, they did. Then they lost control. The beasts took over and turned this island into a living hell.
Not much has changed in terms of gameplay, so you still travel from place to place with your group and wipe out half of the continent. A simple but addictive game principle where you usually only have to pay attention to your own health bar. Nevertheless, there are a few innovations that I liked. For starters, you can now find set items, and let me tell you, I totally underestimated them. I was under the impression that they would work like in most other hack and slash games by providing a few bonuses once you have completed them. While this is also true here, it's far more ingenious than that. All your set items will receive a separate bonus when you find another one. Let's have a look at the Kit of Kash, for example, which consists of armor pieces and a Wolverine blade. The armor gives you an additional stat bonus for every set item you have, while the blade gives you more life per hit back with each additional item. As a result, the set items are very effective, even in the late game. Unfortunately, I noticed that way too late. By the way, finding these set items is not randomized but can always be found in fixed locations. The developers went so far as to give many of these sets their own backstories for that special something. But it seems like all of the new gear you can find is favored towards hybrid classes, especially if you look at the stats of stabs. But I can only advise against it. Even with my single classes, I had problems meeting the minimum requirements for most of them. The pack animals are either one of the new attractions here that are meant to replace your mules. Not only do they hoard your inventory, but you can also use them in combat, which is just a big joke. If you do not command these things manually, then they will just stay away like the four-legged relatives. And even if they attack, it doesn't take long until they bleed on the ground. Therefore, I recommend getting another mule, especially because they can carry more items. You can now also use displacers to travel back to town, which can be usually found at the end of a dungeon, but I had the feeling that the developers were simply too lazy to create new, exciting locations and therefore used a teleporter to recycle what they already had. But we will get to the map design, don't you worry. New spells are of course also included, although I haven't found many useful ones. As far as combat magic is concerned, I mostly relied on the good old bomb. Only toward the end I found something helpful in the form of haste. This allows you to increase your party's movement and attack speed, but only for a few seconds, and the spell also consumed all of my mana. It is also not automatically cast, which makes it very impractical. Nevertheless, it would have been a shame not to use it, so I did the following. At the merchant, I covered myself with mana potions, cast a spell, drank a mana potion, cast a spell, drank a mana potion. You get the idea, because in Dungeon Siege, the duration of a buff increases the more you use it. Although I wasted a good 10 minutes of my existence, I was able to play the rest of the game permanently with haste, which was quite lovely. Moving over to nature magic, I thought the proximity of the enemy with the help of the shock spell. This can only be used at a short distance but does a lot of damage. I combined this with the Orb of Lightning, which automatically zips nearby enemies and belongs to one of the new spells. Didn't think that a nature mage would be more powerful here than a combat one, but so be it. By the way, there are now also a few extra spells that can help you outside combat, such as turning items into gold, so look out for that too. Otherwise, the expansion brings some quality of life features that I don't want to miss anymore. Potions can now be distributed to the whole party with a push of a button, and your scrap can be sold to the merchant all at once without having to click on each individually. The world map now provides an extra portion of immersion by gradually revealing itself during your playthrough. This doesn't really add anything, but I still found it a cool idea. But by far the best new feature is the average damage indicator under each of your weapons and spells. This makes it so much easier to determine whether the newly found weapon is better or not. And as it turns out, two-hand weapons are all for nothing, because in many cases they are inferior to the one-hand weapons, and of course you can't wear a shield anymore. Speaking for the rest of the game, it is pretty much more of the same, so expect a lot of fighting. Graphically, everything remains the same here. After all, it's just an expansion. The jungle is one of the new environments you explore and is nicely done, but many of the locations and foes you fight were simply copied from the main game. The most disappointment I had was with the towns. There were only a few of them in the main game, but they were always a highlight, like the city of Glacian. Ahok, the village where the game begins, is only a pale copy of that. They have even duplicated the original buildings 1-to-1 and called it a day, which also brings me to my biggest criticism, the atmosphere. While the gameplay can get repetitive over time, the original developers had a talent for drawing excellent landscapes where you want to get lost. Legend of Arana, on the other hand, seems quite heartless and simple. There are only 2 towns you visit, and I was especially excited about the Ukraine city. What might this look like, especially considering how much they got hyped up until this point? But then came pure disappointment. Their city is simply a confusing collection of small islands connected by bridges. That was no fun to explore. After that, it got even worse. Often you only find just a lonely merchant in the middle of nowhere, or even just a goddamn vending machine. The attention to detail is lackluster, to say the least. Unfortunately, there were also technical issues with shadows and other effects, as well as some minor sound bugs I encountered. Problems that I couldn't remember having in the main game. I don't know if the Wheeltail version is to blame or if Windows had screwed up my system through an update, but in the end I simply lowered the graphic settings to escape the madness. A big advantage in the Wheeltail version, however, is that you finally get a real ending and are no longer thrown back into the main menu once the final boss has been defeated. In addition, you now have access to the multiplayer mode. This can also be done solo and offers a completely new campaign to explore. Sadly, Square had totally messed this up when they re-released the game. And that is Legend of Arana. I didn't enjoy the new campaign that much. It wasn't bad, but if you have never played the main campaign before, you should better start there first. The extra campaign gives you more of the same but just worse. Some of you might wonder whether it is even worth buying the expansion or not. My friends, you asked the wrong question. Why do you still want to buy the vanilla Dungeon Siege? In the add-on, you can also play the original campaign and still get access to all the quality of life features. This makes the vanilla Dungeon Siege obsolete for me, and that is all I have to say. Thank you for watching, everyone, and until next time.
So, you're an adventurer. That sounds fun. Except for the possibility of being eaten by a monster. That wouldn't be very enjoyable. Long hours, too. And what if you went out and risked life and limb and then didn't find any treasure at all? That wouldn't be very fun either. But if you can avoid being eaten and find some gold, well, then being an adventurer would be most enjoyable, I would think.